Hello, everyone. Welcome to this very interesting session of the Global Migrant Festival. This session is titled Humor as the Only Weapon, a newspaper by migrants and artists from Russia. With me today are two very well known artists and activists from Russia. One is Anna Tereshkina. She's a Russian post-war and contemporary artist, and her work has been featured in several exhibitions at key galleries and museums, including the Winzavod Contemporary Art Center and the Garage Museum of Contemporary Art. Anna has been featured in articles for the ArtDaily, the Blok Magazine, and the Ocula. With me also is Olga Giuliano. She's the artist, founder, and editor of the Utopian Agency and of the Nasreddin newspaper in Russia, together with Anna Tereshkina. In 2011, in collaboration with human rights advocate Andrei Yakimov, she created a board game about labor migration called Russia, the Land of Opportunities. Since 2015, Giuliano has been collaborating with Lampedusa and Hamburg group of refugee activists on theatrical performance translation based on Andrei Platonov's novella Zan. Welcome, Anna and Olga. Thank you for being part of Global Migrant Festival.
Hi, thank you for introduction, Shivaja. Today we're going to talk about our newspaper, Nasreddin in Russia. And in this project, I'm mostly responsible for texts and editing and just some general ideas.
Hi, I am Anna, and in Nasreddin Russia newspaper, I'm responsible for illustrations and all graphic work.
First of all, we would like to describe the historical and social context that we work in. As many of you may know, in 1991, Soviet Union, which was the biggest state in the world for 70 years, falls apart, and 15 independent states appeared in its place. But in many of them, the economic and social institutes collapsed, and most of the population experienced extreme impoverishment and instability. There were civil wars in some countries like Tajikistan. And so when economic situations had stabilized a little bit in big Russian cities, a lot of people from the former Soviet republics like Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Moldova, Armenia headed to Russia in search of work. But the situation in Russia had changed, and we still keep the free visa agreement with those countries, but there were a lot of legal and bureaucratic traps for the migrants in order to make proper papers, in order to get proper job. Migrants have to do quite a lot of paperwork, and there are a lot of traps in this way. And if the first generation of migrants still thought of themselves as former Soviet citizens because they were raised in Soviet Union, they spoke Russian, they went to Soviet army, and they thought of migration as just of going to another city in order to get better economic situation, the Russian citizens started to look at them completely differently. They started to perceive them as culturally, ethnically, religiously, and class different, hostile aliens, and treat them quite bad. In the beginning of 2000s, there was a very high level of crimes on ethnic base. There were a lot of killings of foreigners in Russia. And of course, the economic and legal situation for labor migrants and Russian citizens also became unequal because labor of migrants in many situations is deliberately made semi-legal, it opens a huge possibility of overexploitation and fraud and unlimited working day for big corporations, for individuals and businesses which hire the migrants. So it creates very complicated situation for migrants nowadays in Russia.
The newspaper Nasreddin in Russia originated from weekly meetings of a group of migrants and artists that we started in spring 2014, and we decided to use a folkloric character, Mullah Nasreddin, Hodja Nasreddin, known as Mullah Nasreddin in Azerbaijan or Juha in Arabic countries. And this is an international character, a wise fool, a trickster, usually depicted sitting backwards on his donkey. And he's popular in Turkish, Arabic, and Central Asian traditions. But many of stories were being translated to Russian during Soviet time because he represented a fight against greedy rich and social injustice. That's why this character could unite us all on the post-Soviet space. This is the flyer we spread in migrant community. It's an invitation to Hodja Nasreddin joke contest, and we met together in Chaykhana or tea house. We have a lot of tea houses in St. Petersburg, and eat some national food, drink tea, and discuss different problems. We decided to use this character of Hodja Nasreddin in our conversations with migrants because it allows them to speak more openly about their situations and feelings. And Nasreddin also allows to use fiction, humor, imagination, and they used it as a mask or as a protection. So we would ask migrants to think what Nasreddin would do or say in their place if he would go to Russia for work. And we had a lot of textual and graphic materials from the meeting, and we used them. They were published in few following issues of the newspapers. On this picture, you can see the big comics with bubbles, and text in the bubbles was created together on these meetings. So the first three issues were published in 2014, and the first of them was about housing and related problems. Nasreddin got out of such situations when people don't want to rent apartment for migrants with Asian appearance, or cops ask migrants for registration, but nobody wants to register them. We also made a research on the history of one building on English embankment in St. Petersburg, where many migrants lived in 2014, but one day they were suddenly kicked out by the owner. And we made a scheme where you can trace all the owners and residents of this house from 19th century till 2014, the year when the newspaper was published.
I will speak a little bit about the second and third issue. The second one was dedicated to mass media coverage of migration. It became a very hot topic, but the image of a migrant that Russian mass media would create would be of a potentially dangerous, criminal, culturally different, unable to cope, low educated barbarian, basically. And that was a very, very, very sensible thing for the participants of our meetings. They were deeply, profoundly offended by this image, because they thought of themselves as people who work much harder than Russians do, who receive lower income, who are not protected by any laws or social security, and still they do their work good, and they wanted to have some dignity, some respect, at least for their work, and also for their culture, which maybe was different, but still there is culture. And what we did, we watched together Russian talk shows and read together some newspapers, and we would try to imagine what actually Hodja Nasreddin would answer the presenter of a talk show to some kind of frequently asked questions like, why do migrants work illegally, or like, and so on. And that was a very therapeutical task, I guess. And the third issue, the question of the third issue was, do migrants practice some art? And if they do, what kind of art is it? And actually, the question came up because the working day usually is from like 12 to 16 hours, so it hardly leaves any time or energy for anything besides work and sleep. And so we were very intrigued, like, do they still have some energy for self, for some art or creativity? And we actually discovered very interesting genres, but maybe I will not talk about it because it's too much, but you can download for free the newspaper and read it.
The fourth issue, dedicated for marriage and family relation in the context of migration. There were two big topics. The first is the change in women's role and their responsibility when men, husbands, fathers go for work to a different country. And we went to Armenia, to the village Mesmasrik, where we met women from such family. And we hang out with them for 4 days and found out that not only problems, but also a good side of this phenomenon. And the second big part is a big scheme. We love scheme very much. The cost of wedding. It's an illustration about stages of a wedding in Central Asian tradition and its preparation for a family of migrant workers. And there are also all the prices of every stage. And you can see that it's really difficult process when all the family are labor migrant and their wage is very low. And the title of the fifth issue is 611 and 724, and it's about working regimes of a working class and creating class. And the authors of the issue are migrants who combine work for life with creative ambitions and try to find a balance in it. And I will introduce them all to you shortly. This is our team, one of our brainstorm meetings. Birmet Varubaeva changed a lot of different jobs, from art manager to cook in a bakehouse. And together we made a comic scheme where you can compare one day of a cook and one day of an art manager. And there you can see that there are a lot of exploitation and devaluation of basic human right to rest in both this profession.
And this is our regular contributor, Ilhamjan Abdukakharov. Ilhamjan comes from the city of Osh in the south of Kyrgyzstan, and there Uzbek and Kyrgyz population lived relatively peacefully for some 20 years before 2010. And in 2010 there was a big ethnic clash, and after this clash big amount of Uzbek speaking population started to leave and go to Russia in search of safe life and work. And that's also the case of Ilhamjan, who used to work in Uzbek television in Bishkek before, and who had to try all kinds of physical work in Moscow. But Ilhamjan still uses his brilliant skills of writing to describe his work and migrant life experience in Moscow in his brilliant short stories. It's fiction stories full of humor and lightness, even though they describe sometimes quite harsh situations. And he's a contributor. He contributed our third issue and also the fifth issue with a specially written play. And this is Ching Gizaidarov, who is also from Bishkek, who is also from Kyrgyzstan, but he's from the capital city of Bishkek. And Chingiz is a professional artist. He graduated as a painter in Bishkek, and then he had quite successful career there, but it was only successful in terms of great art production, gaining quite a lot of popularity, but not at all in economic sense. And so in order to become economically sustainable, he had to go to Moscow to work there as a carrier and lately as a courier. But he managed to combine this kind of work with artistic work, and he had become quite efficiently the part of Moscow art scene. And we have published some of his graphic works, which are depicting life of his colleagues, the carriers, also migrants who work with them in all these works.
This is Zernigor Amanilaeva, a lawyer, human rights advocate, activist, and mother. She's from Uzbekistan, but lives with her family in Moscow. For the fifth issue, Zernigor wrote an article about her work as an advocate for labor migrants who need to defend their rights. And some of them acted together with her using Hodja Nasreddin's methods, and they won the trial due to it. And Zernigor also translated our newspaper to Uzbek language, and all the people we introduced are not only just authors of their materials, but also editors, brainstorm team, and our friends.
Yeah, and for us is quite important the language politics. Actually, the first three issues were published only in Russian and in English, but it was just because we got funding from Europe, and that was the condition that it has to be translated either to German or to English, but that's not exactly what we wanted. So we got a little bit more freedom with the last two issues, and we managed to translate them to the languages of the people that we worked with. And so the fourth issue was produced in collaboration with Armenian women and with girls from Uzbekistan and Tajikistan who helped us with the researches. And so one of them, Zernigor, we asked to translate the newspaper to Uzbek, and also we got translation of the newspaper to Armenian. And the last issue has materials both in Kyrgyz, Uzbek, and Russian languages. And you might be interested how the newspaper circulate. And I have to say that unfortunately we don't manage to publish some huge amount of issues. It's usually about couple thousands, 3,000, depending on the our grant situation or institutions that we collaborate with. So the first stage we usually give it to the people with whom we work, and they give it to their friends and to their families and their network. Also, we come back to the places where we often meet, which are chaihanas, traditional tea houses, which are popular in Central Asia, but now are also popular in big Russian cities. And that's the places where you can eat very good and cheap food, and where diaspora meets, and it's also very popular in between Russians. So this is another place. And also as artists, we are quite often invited to to take part in some art exhibitions or festivals and so on. And here you can see part of exposition in Moscow Museum of Garage, where we took part in a very big exhibition. And this kind of museums is mostly visited by art crowd and Moscow middle class. But for us, is also very important that the first people to see these exhibitions are actually the people who put it together, who install it, and also the people who keep the space clean. And they are, of course, labor migrants. And that was maybe one of the first time that they have they felt that actually museum is speaking to them, not about some abstract issues, but about their life and in their language. And so I think it was quite a pleasant realization for them that Russian culture or like the international culture that we are trying to produce is also speaking to them, not only to like Moscow privileged people. And besides exhibitions, we do make some events. Like here you can see a presentation of new issue, which also took place in Moscow in the Russian Museum, which was done with all our team in the form of traditional tea drinking. And we have invited musicians from Tajikistan, from Pamirs, and other people who contributed to the cultural program. And another event that we've done in 2014 in collaboration with Jon Irigoyen, who is a Basque artist residing now in Finland, was called Disco Mobile, which goes to the Caribbean tradition of mobile discotheques, when people from poor neighborhoods would decorate loudspeakers with some characters and put them in a big car and go around with them and make street parties. So we made a replica of this sort of event. We created this kind of box that we put on top of a car, and we collected the playlist of our participants, and we went through the Nevsky Prospect, which is the main avenue in St. Petersburg, to the biggest market where also mainly migrants work, accompanied with two clowns. One clown was dressed as a Russian policeman, and another one was dressed as a migrant woman who was beating him up with a broom. And what happened that when people in the market saw us, they just all started to dance and laugh. And here you can play the video maybe.
маленький платок такой станется. Да. А большой...
Там?
People from St. Petersburg, here we go. Please join us.
Приходите на конкурс шутки «Хочу Насреддина» в миллионную 10 в 7 часов. Мы ждем вас.
Come with us, people from St. Petersburg. Free your mind, free your soul. Here we are to make you have fun.
you very much, Olga, and I think this was very interesting and something very new for, I believe, most of our audience. And I had a few questions, if that is okay, to ask you. First of all, how was the reaction of the people when they saw the newspaper or the exhibition, both Russians as well as the migrants?
Well, I think some years ago, like 10 years ago, for instance, Russian art scene was much more nationalistic and much more hostile towards migration. And I would say that during last years or last decade, it gradually became more liberal, or at least it became unacceptable to openly say totally like openly nationalist things in the art scene. Nevertheless, Russian society in general still remains quite nationalist. But basically, I think we started to do this newspaper when the situation was already changing. And in 2014, all the Russian mass media attention was driven by the fact that the war with Ukraine started. So it was the moment when Russian nationalism was all gone into this direction, in the anti-Ukraine direction. And we did have some participants from Ukraine as well, who were like one of the first refugees from Ukraine. But we didn't really focus on this topic particularly. In the newspaper, at least, we did discuss it a lot in the meetings, but somehow, like, it didn't become part of the newspaper issues. But I guess that maybe that's why the newspaper was mainly received quite positively in Russia.
What about the migrants, say Tajiks or Armenians or Uzbeks or Kyrgyz? How did they react to your newspaper or working together with you? How was their reaction?
Ты хочешь сказать что-нибудь?
The reaction was very different, and I recall that it was really positive. But if we just give somebody of guys who work on the building, как настройки,
Construction
building,
site.
Construction site in cultural house Rosa Luxemburg, where we had an solo exhibition, the presentation of our fourth issue, and there was such guys who repair and construct the building, and we gave them some newspapers, and we don't know if they read it or not, but when I went to the subway, I just found it on the street. So very different reaction.
Yeah, also some people reacted with suspicion because they were used to react with suspicion to any mass media, because they were so used to this idea that the newspapers write just horrible things about migration, and the TV coverage is so sad that they were already very, very, they didn't really trust us. And we took some effort to gain some trust. But the younger generation that we work with now is super positive and super enthusiastic about this project. And actually now mine and Anya's roles are kind of going a little bit backwards, and we are trying to give space to them, because it's actually about them and their parents and their lives, and I think that they do it brilliantly, and we are very happy that they are enthusiastic to participate in this project.
You work with communities who have a lot of conflict among themselves, like the Kyrgyz have conflict with Uzbek, similarly Tajiks may have conflict with Turkmen, and so on. How was the dynamics of working with these communities who have a lot of conflict back home among themselves? Was there any tension, or was it a way of building solidarity among different migrant?
Yeah, actually, a few times we were almost in a dangerous situation. For instance, when we made this mobile discotheque, sometimes there would be, like, for instance, Uzbek music or like Caucasian music play in the market, and some people would come to us and say, change the music now, and it would look quite dangerous. So in those cases we would put some Latin music to like get rid of the tension, and then put back different kinds of Central Asian and Caucasian music again. But yeah, somehow it's slippery field, and in general the situation actually nowadays there are much more conflicts on ethnic ground in between migrants themselves than in between Russians and migrants. Before it was like Russian against the like newcomers, the aliens, and they didn't make the difference if they were like Armenian or Azeri. But now with all those conflicts, it's there are much more conflicts in between the migrants themselves, and it's quite untransparent situation also for Russian police, because it's also semi-legal community, and it's really hard to get to know what's going on. But a lot of times it comes out, of course. But our politics is that we are trying to find a common ground and common problems that we all have together. Like we as artists who moved from different Russian cities to central, to biggest cities, or like just like people who have lived all their life in St. Petersburg or Moscow, but still have no possibility to buy an apartment or to work without self-exploitation. So we would usually speak about the problems which unite us and put us together as a group. And we use Nasreddin as a also character familiar to everyone, which by means of humor helps to overcome the ethnic, religious, and other differences.
And how is it working for two of you? How is it working with people from different religion, different cultural background, different attitude towards women necessarily? So how is it for you two personally to be working on a project like this?
Хочешь ответить?
Наверное, мне трудно.
Well, first few years, the main problem was that most of migrants were male, and most of the artists were female. So there was quite a lot of misunderstandings and slight tensions in, how can I explain this, in the way that we understood proximity and relationships. And some of the men would, for instance, call to some of the members of our team and offer to marry them, and it would be kind of an awkward situation. But then we tried to think of it and work with this problem, because it's this problem comes over and over again in many art projects in different places. and it's actually normal thing that people need not only their rights to be implemented and not only economic equality, but also kind of affective equality, that they also do have feelings, they have some requests for romantic love, for friendship, for proximity, and it's a human thing. It's usual. The thing is that it's maybe the traditions of revealing is different in different cultures. And actually in the fourth issue we try to work with this topic and explore it a little bit.
That was the marriage issue.
Yeah, exactly. So we just like try to analyze it and to think about this issue, because it's not less important that all discrimination and economic inequality and so on.
And how was the state reacting? Let's say when you took a mobile disco, or when you work with migrants to respond to the police with humor, or to the landlord with humor. How did the police react when you move around your mobile disco, or how did the landlord react when someone replies in a funny way? Do you have any stories?
Yeah, well, we were stopped on our way by police a couple of times, and they asked what was going on, what was happening, why are we playing the music so loud. But fortunately, this action was part of a big art event, which is called Manifesta, and we have had a paper saying that it's like part of this. So, like, art is a very good cover, and it worked quite okay.
And it sounds like you are more hopeful about the future. Sounds like you are saying that Russia is beyond that extreme nationalism, and maybe it's more open and more cosmopolitan now. What's your future plan with this project?
Well, it's hard to say. Russian society is still polarized. It's still there are still a lot of tensions and quite a lot of nationalism and nationalisms. But we are optimistic, and we hope that it would change for better, because now there is a whole new generation of migrant teenagers and young people who grew up in Russia, who are perfectly educated, who are bilingual, who understand both of the cultures, and who are producing amazing art, and who work as doctors, who work everywhere. And so, of course, we hope it would change to better. And also in comparison to the situation with refugees in Europe, it's a better situation, because Russia still has free visa agreement with most of post-Soviet countries, which allows more freedom of circulation. But actually, after after the pandemic started, the situation became really dramatic, because a lot of labor migrants had stuck in Moscow without work and without the possibility to go back. So what we did, it was Anya's idea. We started to an auction in which we sold big part of the graphic archive of Anna's drawings, and we donated all this money to NGOs, which were distributing the money in between the families who were stuck in Russia and who needed help. But of course, we couldn't help to many of them. So it's still quite bad economic and medical situation. And frankly, we feel quite lost in it. We don't really know what to do further, and how to react to this also constantly changing situation, because it changes like every month or maybe even every week. And now we are basically thinking of what to do next, and we are quite perplexed.
But we hope that we will have a more opportunity to work together on new issues. We have some topics.
Yeah, also maybe Hodja needs to travel to more places. Like we haven't been yet to Uzbekistan with him and Kyrgyzstan. So maybe we also have to produce some issues in some other places.
Thank you. Any final words from you, Anna or
Say again?
any final words for our audience from you?
Well, thank you for this invitation. And it's great that you are making such a thing as a Global Migrant Festival. I think it's really important to see migration as a global phenomena, which is happening pretty much everywhere, and to establish the dialogue of migrants from different continents, different countries, to see how much actually do they have in common, and to find out some ways of solidarity and knowing what's going on, and somehow maybe learning something from each other.
Yes, thank you. We're happy to be a part of it.
Thank you very much, Anna and Olga, for this very interesting project, for sharing this with us. And I hope that many other people, artists around the world also get some inspiration from this initiative and start something similar. So we wish you all the best, and hopefully things get better in Russia for the migrants as well as for your project. And with that, we have come to the end of this session. For our audience, thanks a lot for attending this session. And there are a lot of interesting sessions on the Global Migrant Festival Facebook page. So please stay tuned for the entire festival. Thank you so much, and bye bye.